السلام عليكم طلبتنا الأعزاء. محاضرتنا الثانية بمادة الميديكال Embryology, the first week of development, ovulation to implantation. Learning objectives of this lecture. By the end of this lecture, each one of you should be able to define ovarian cycle, ovulation and fertilization, explain the mechanism and barriers involved in sperm transport. Also, we're going to talk about the changes that occur to the spermatozoa prior to fertilization, changes that occur in the oocyte after sperm penetration. We're going to talk about polyspermy and the ways to prevent polyspermy. And last, we're going to talk about some contraceptive methods, infertility, and some assisted conception techniques. So what is ovarian cycle? Ovarian cycle are cyclic changes that occur in the ovary when the woman reaches puberty. So the first menstrual cycle, we call it menarche. The end of menstruation in women, we call it menopause. So from menarche to menopause, the ovary undergoes cyclic changes, usually monthly cycles under the control of pituitary hormone. The hypothalamus secrete a hormone called gonadotropin releasing hormone اللي هو ال GnRH. هذا ال GnRH راح يشتغل على ال anterior lobe of the pituitary gland to secrete two hormones نسميهن ال gonadotropins. These hormones are the FSH, follicle stimulating hormone, and LH, luteinizing hormone. These two gonadotropin will act on the ovary, and the ovary will produce two hormones اللي هن progesterone and estrogen. So we have the hypothalamus. As I said, the hypothalamus will secrete a hormone called gonadotropin releasing hormone. Okay, the GnRH will act on the anterior lobe of the pituitary gland, and it will release the FSH and LH. They will act on the ovary, and these changes are called the ovarian cycle. So by the beginning of the cycle, let's say this is the first day of the menstrual cycle, the first day of menstruation, we call it the first day of the cycle. What will happen? FSH released by the pituitary gland will increase. This FSH will stimulate the growth of the ovarian follicle. So each month, about 15 to 20 follicles will be stimulated to grow. Only one of these follicles will become mature and ovulated. At around day 13 or 14 of the cycle, large amount of LH will be released from the pituitary. We call this the LH surge. The LH surge will stimulate the process of ovulation. After ovulation, the remaining structure of the follicle will change into an endocrine structure called the corpus luteum. The corpus luteum will secrete the hormone progesterone. So in the first half of the cycle, as a result of follicle growth, estrogen will be released. Okay? While in the second half, progesterone will be released in much higher concentration than estrogen from the corpus luteum. The corpus luteum is an endocrine structure. It will remain viable for about 14 days. So at the end of 14 days, if there is no fertilization, no embryo, it will degenerate and become the corpus albicans. The level of progesterone will decrease, and the next menstrual cycle will start. So these changes occur in the ovary. Together with these changes, there are concomitant changes occur in the uterine endometrial stroma. These changes are, so at the beginning of the cycle, we call it the menstrual phase, the 5 days of the cycle. Then we have the proliferative phase. The proliferative phase, it means that the endometrial stroma will start to grow under the influence of estrogen. After ovulation, the endometrium will enter into the secretory phase. So the endometrial stroma will be more, the glands will be more dilated and secretory in preparation for implantation. So as I said, the menstrual cycles are usually 28-day cycles during which the endometrium undergo changes as I explained in the previous slide. So at first we have the menstrual phase, then we have the proliferative phase. It occurs in parallel to the growth of the ovarian follicle and stimulated by estrogen. And last, we have the secretory phase. It begins after ovulation under the influence of progesterone released by the corpus luteum. What will happen to the follicle? In each cycle, as I said, 15 to 20 follicle will start to grow under the influence of follicle stimulating hormone. Only one of these follicles will reach full maturity and ovulated, while the rest of the follicles will degenerate. The degenerated follicles will form structure called the corpus atriticum. So the growing ovarian follicle will pass through 3 stages of development. First, we have the primary follicle, then secondary follicle, and last we have the tertiary follicle. So as I said in the previous lecture, we have the follicles. All the follicles in the ovary are called the primordial follicle, which consists of a primary oocyte surrounded by single flat layer of epithelial cells. So we call it a primordial follicle. Then these follicular cells will change into cuboidal and then stratified. At this stage, we call it a primary follicle. Each month, about 15 to 20 of these follicles will undergo through these changes. So the primary follicle, followed by appearance of the antrum, which is a fluid-filled space, occur in the granulosa cell. Now we call it secondary follicle. Also, the follicular layer surrounding the follicular ovarian cells that surround the follicle will form 2 distinct layers, an inner theca interna and an outer theca externa. Here they are more visible. And when the antrum enlarges more, the follicle, we call it tertiary or mature or Graafian follicles. Ovulation, as I said, at mid-cycle, LH surge will stimulate the process of ovulation. What will occur? So the LH will increase the concentration of a factor. We call it maturation promoting factor. This will induce the oocyte to resume the first meiotic division. So the oocyte will finish meiosis 1 and enter into meiosis 2. The second change that occurs in response to LH surge is the stimulation of progesterone production by the corpus luteum, and last, it stimulates the process of ovulation, ovarian rupture and ovulation. So the ovulated oocyte will be in metaphase 2. It will then, so once the oocyte initiate the metaphase, it will get, the second meiotic division, it will become arrested at metaphase 2 and then ovulated. So the oocyte with some cells, some of the granulosa cell, these cells are called cumulus oophorus. So when the oocyte is ovulated, it will be surrounded by some of these cells. We call them the cumulus oophorus complex. So the oocyte is arrested in meiosis 2 in the metaphase stage, will only finish meiosis 2 if get fertilized. So if the sperm enter the oocyte, meiosis 2 will be resumed and completed. Otherwise, the oocyte will be degenerated within around 24 hours. So this is a picture of the ovary showing the stages of follicular development, or we call it folliculogenesis. So primordial follicle will change into primary follicle, then growing follicle. With the appearance of the antrum, the follicle is called secondary or antral follicle. The antrum size will increase, and last, the oocyte will ovulate it. This structure will form the corpus luteum. So the corpus luteum, as I said, is an endocrine structure that secretes progesterone. It will stimulate the endometrium of the uterus to thicken and enter into the secretory phase in preparation for implantation. So what will happen to the corpus luteum؟ شنو الفيت مالت الcorpus luteum؟ يعني شنو مصيره؟ So if there is no fertilization of the oocyte and there is no implantation, the corpus luteum will degenerate within 13 to 14 days. As a result, progesterone secretion will be reduced and the next cycle will begin. However, if there is fertilization and implantation, the corpus luteum will continue to secrete progesterone for about 4 months. And in this case, we call it the corpus luteum gravidatis. After 4 months, the progesterone production will be by the placenta. So after 4 months, the corpus luteum gravidatis will degenerate and involute and become the corpus albicans again. Following ovulation, so the oocyte will enter into the fallopian tube. So we have this left fallopian tube, we have another right fallopian tube on the right side. Ovulation is is believed to occur at each month from one ovary. So if the ovulation occurs from the left ovary, the oocyte will be picked up by the fallopian tube, also called uterine tube or oviduct, and the oocyte will go toward the uterine endometrium. Fertilization is the process by which the oocyte and the sperm fuse. It occurs in the ampulla of the fallopian tube. So if there is sperm in the female genital tract, the sperm will swim up through the cervix, the uterus, and then enters the tube and into the ampulla. So fertilization occurs in the ampulla of the fallopian tube. This is the widest part of the fallopian tube. Normally, only 1% of the spermatozoa deposited in the vagina will reach the fallopian tube. What will happen to the spermatozoa prior to fertilizing the oocyte? So we have two terms. We have capacitation and acrosome reaction. Capacitation المقصود منه هو إكساب السبرم القدرة على fertilizing the oocyte من capacity. So spermatozoa are not able to fertilize the oocyte immediately after entering the female genital tract. It must undergo a process of what we call capacitation. So what will occur during capacitation? It involves removal of the glycoprotein coat and the seminal plasma protein from the sperm head, from the acrosome. And only capacitated sperm are able to penetrate through the zona pellucida. The second reaction, we call it acrosome reaction. The acrosome, as I said from the first lecture, is a glycoprotein coat that covers the head of the spermatozoa. Once the spermatozoa attaches to the sperm receptors in the zona pellucida, the acrosome reaction is induced. So what will happen? There is a release of lysosomal enzymes from the acrosome head. اللي هن ذني الانزيم such as acrosine and trypsin ذني راح يساعدن السpermatozoa to penetrate the zona pellucida. After the binding of the oocyte and sperm, so the binding of the oocyte and spermatozoal membrane will induce certain changes. First, there will be release of cortical granules from the oocyte, and also we have calcium waves that radiate around the oocyte membrane. These two changes are important to prevent penetration of further spermatozoa. يعني أول ما يطب الفيرست spermatozoa راح تصير ذني الchanges اللي هن release of cortical granules, واللي second change هو calcium waves. Then important to prevent further penetration by further spermatozoa. والcondition اللي هو fertilization of the oocyte by more than one sperm is called polyspermy. طبعا البوليسبرمي هو abnormal، يعني النورمال هو الoocyte fertilized by single spermatozoa. If it is fertilized by more than one spermatozoa, the condition is called polyspermy and it is prevented by these two changes. طبعا the second change that occur following the binding of the spermatozoa and oocyte plasma membrane هو oocyte will resume and finish the second meiotic division, so the result will be the definitive oocyte and the second polar body. Also the oocyte will be activated to start the cleavage. راح أتكلم عنه بالسلايدات اللاحقة. So what are the main results of fertilization? أول شيء is the restoration of the diploid state. We have the spermatozoa haploid تحتوي على 23 كروموسوم. الoocyte haploid. After fertilization, the diploid state will be restored. The second result of fertilization هو determination of the sex of the new individual. So if the oocyte is fertilized by a Y-bearing spermatozoa, the individual is male. If it is fertilized by an X-bearing spermatozoa, the individual is female. And last, initiation, يعني activation of the oocyte and initiation of cleavage. So what's the clinical importance of understanding the process of fertilization and sperm activation within the female genital tract? You can advise patients, once you understand where fertilization occurs, how it occurs, you can advise patients about contraception واللي هي عملية منع الحمل. We have two types of contraception. We have barrier method and hormonal method. The barrier method such as male condom, female condom. الهرمونال هو involve the use of hormones اللي هن either progesterone or progesterone and estrogen. We call it the birth control pills. And we have also contraception by the use of IUD or intrauterine device. Also, you will get an idea about why some women are not able to become pregnant. So the condition, we call it infertility, is inability of the female to become pregnant after 1 year of sexual intercourse. It affects about 15% of couple، يعني 15% من الأزواج يعانون من مشكلة الانفرتيليتي. شنو الكوزز؟ طبعا male infertility إلها كوزز، واكو female causes of female infertility، واكو عندنا common causes يعني causes بالميل والفيميل both male and female. male infertility مثلا عندنا insufficient number of spermatozoa، يعني قلت لكم only 1% of spermatozoa will reach the site of fertilization. فتخيلوا إذا العدد هو already قليل وتوصل منه فقط 1% للسايت of fertilization، فبالتالي يصير عندنا infertility أو poor motility، يعني spermatozoa are not able to swim up to the site of fertilization. كذلك الفيميل infertility causes such as occluded uterine tube، يعني fallopian tube is obstructed، فبالتالي الأوسايت ما راح تقدر تنزل لليوترس والسبام ما راح يقدر يصعد للأوسايت. أو عندنا hostile cervical mucus، أو مثلا ما يصير عندنا ovulation، يصيح له an ovulatory cycle. والتريتمنت we will advise the patient according to the cause. We have intrauterine insemination, in vitro fertilization اللي هي عملية أطفال الأنابيب. بعد أن تتم fertilization, so after penetration of the oocyte by the spermatozoa, we will have the 2PN stage. We call it the 2-pronuclear stage. As you can see here, this is the nucleus of the oocyte and this is the nucleus of the sperm. or يعني ممكن هاي تكون مالت الأوسايت، ممكن هاي السبب، بس الفكرة إنه هاي نيوكليوس مال one gamete، هاي نيوكليوس مال the other gamete. هاي الستيج نسميها 2PN stage. بعدها the oocyte will undergo a series of cell division, we call it cleavage. So هاي الخلية راح تنقسم into two cells. The first cleavage division occur in the first 24 hour. بعدها ال two cell راح تنقسم into 4 and 8 and so on. حوالي اليوم الرابع بعد الفرتيلايزيشن. So by day 4 the number of cells، طبعا لأن السيلز نصيح لهم بلاستومير، يعني هسه هذا الامبريو 1 2 3 4 نصيح له 4 cell stage أو 4 بلاستومير، هذا 7 to 8. فمن يوصل الامبريو into 16 to 32 cell we call it the morula. ليش؟ لأنه بعد boundaries between the blastomeres will be not visible، فيصير شلون compacted structure نصيح له الموريولا. بعدها fluid will enter into the morula. At this stage the embryo we call it blastocyst. Here you can see that there are two cell population، يعني البلاستومير راح تتجمع into two cell. هذه اللي مسويت لنا هيك شلون البول لايك structure we call it inner cell mass أو embryoblast. ليش نصيح لها embryoblast؟ لأنه هي راح تكون مصدر الخلايا مالت الامبريو بالمستقبل. والاوتر سيل اللي هي على البريفري هاي هنا طبعا اوضح، هذا blastocyst at more advanced stage of development، يعني تشوفون الفلويد the blastocele is larger than this blastocyst. فذني الخلايا اللي بالاوتسايد we call it the trophoblast. هذا embryoblast، هذا trophoblast. هذا الاسم الثاني inner cell mass، هذا outer cell mass. So by the end of first week، يعني by day 5 تقريبا البلاستوسيست will hatch from the zona pellucida. إذا تلاحظون هنا بهذا السلايد البلاستوسيست والزونا pellucida اللي هي الجلايكوبروتين كوت بعده موجود. حوالي ال day 5 after fertilization it will hatched، يعني يطلع من الزونا pellucida، وبعدين البلاستوسيست يروح للاندومتريوم، بهذا الوقت يكون واصل لليوترس ويبدي عملية الامبلانتيشن، هي عملية غرس الامبريو باليوتراين وول. طبعا بالسايت اوف كونتاكت، يعني المكان اللي يجي به البلاستوسيست، تصير تشينجز بالاندومتريال ستروما، نصيح له ديسيجوال رياكشن. شنو اللي يصير؟ يعني الخلايا مالت الاندومتريوم will respond to the presence of the embryo and start certain changes. The glands will enlarge and the uterine mucosa become more vascularized. طبعا هذا decidual reaction يبدي بالبداية بالsite of implantation، بعدين ويا الوقت it will spread all over the uterine endometrial stroma. Normally the site of implantation is here, so we have this uterus, the site of implantation around this area. So what's the clinical correlate of understanding the process of implantation? So if the embryo is implanted anywhere else than this site we call it ectopic pregnancy، يعني حمل خارج الرحم. ectopic خارجي يعني. الاكتوبيك بريجننسي طبعا بعدة انواع، ممكن يصير على الاوفري، ممكن يصير بالفالوبيان تيوب، ممكن يصير بالابدومينال كافيتي، ممكن يصير بالسيرفكس. These are abnormal and called ectopic pregnancy. Second we have the embryonic stem cell، الخلايا الجذعية اللي مصدرها from the embryo. شنو مصدرها؟ هاي من الامبريوبلاست. مو قلنا السيل within the blastocyst are divided into inner cell mass و outer cell mass. So الembryonic stem cell ياخذوها من الامبريوبلاست. Also we have the chromosomal abnormalities of the zygote. So if there are chromosomal abnormality, the zygote will develop abnormally. How to يعني نحل هاي المشكلة هو through the IVF، عملية أطفال الأنابيب، with what we call يعني نسوي study للchromosomes of the embryo. فشون نسوي لها study؟ من يوصل الامبريو للcleavage stage مرحلة البلاستومير، راح ياخذون احد الخلايا هاي البلاستومير ويسوون study للجينيتيك material and then they will transfer only the embryos with the normal chromosomes. Thank you very much.